Fan community. I put this a tier lower than the others, as a majority of people out there don't even know of the existence of a Thomas and Friends fan community. For all these years I assumed it was as big as like the My Little Pony or Star Wars fandom or something, but no, it's still pretty underground. Could say it's a very unlikely fandom. The Thomas fan community is an online fandom centered around, well, Thomas, the Railway series, and even All Engines Go to an extent, much like any other fandom for a thing people like. Fans often participate in making remakes and adaptations of stories from the books and show, writing their own unique stories, model making, art, voice acting, discussions, games, and lots more. There's hundreds and thousands of videos dating back to when YouTube was first around to every day on this site now. I highly recommend looking into these if the idea of a Thomas fandom interests you. You'll never know what you may find, and from someone who's been in the fandom for almost a decade at this point, I found a ton of things in it that I absolutely love. The Sad Story of Henry, 1953. The Sad Story of Henry was the first ever recorded adaptation of a Railway series story, directed by Douglas Mayer, produced by BBC for their children's television series, and narrated by Noel Middleton, presumably. For a while it was assumed Julia Lang had narrated for the pilot, as she was a regular narrator for the program, but was later found out to be Noel from a news article going over the episode, although the wiki does still state Julia Lang did narrate for it. As the entry implies, it was broadcasted live on the 14th of June in 1953. Much like the 1984 TV show we all know and love, this episode features model trains, but unlike the 1984 TV show we know and love, these were made with Hornby Dublo models that ran on 00 gauge track. Various models were made for the pilot, which Audrey was not happy with due to the models not looking as good as he wanted. P.R. Wickham, remember that guy for later, was hired to redo the models and were made to appear more accurate to the illustrations. The episode aired at 5 p.m. on the 14th of June, as mentioned before, and while it had many complex and impressive shots, it was infamously shoddy, with the models being very jerky, Edward's model breaking down, and most well known of all, Henry derailing on screen and a hand picking him up. All of which angered Wilbert and Edmund so much that Wilbert sent BBC an ultimatum, cancelling the series along with various letters and reviews panning the episode. Footage of the episode no longer exists, as it was not only a live broadcast, which would have not been recorded in the 1950s, but also because BBC is known for wiping their archives, rendering the pilot lost to time forever. While the episode is gone, various eyewitness testimonies, letters, news articles, and the camera script were preserved, which revealed the Sad Story of Henry was combined with the final story of the book, Edward, Gordon, and Henry. And most memorable of all, many years later, a single image of James's model from the pilot, being the only surviving photograph of it. At least for now. I mean, like, who knows, maybe someone's got like a photo of Henry rotting away in their attic. William Tell Overture Runaway Theme. In seasons 5 and 6, a unique remix of the Runaway theme from the show was made to include William Tell's iconic classical overture into the theme, used in Busy Going Backwards and Thomas and the Jet Engine. It's the theme you're hearing right now in the background. This theme is the first to directly take inspiration from a pre-existing song.
Want a race, Thomas? Beat Bertie? Never mind.
Factory errors. Factory errors, as the name implies, are samples of toys and models that have a defect in them that may accidentally be shipped to different stores around the world. Hundreds of factory errors from various Thomas ranges exist, with people collecting them and, more often than not, selling them for high prices online, as they are a one-of-a-kind. The engines are based on real locomotives. Pretty much all of the engines in the Railway series and TV series are directly based on real-life engines, such as Thomas being an LBSCR E2, Gordon being based on an LNR A1, Edward a Furnace Railway K2, Duck a GWR Pannier tank engine, etc., etc. Some are directly based on specific engines of a class, like Oliver most likely being based on Bolivar, or was just used for illustrator reference, an engine that shares a similar name and number to him, and Class 40 in the TV series being numbered after the real-life D261. Mini-specials. Mini-specials, also known as double-length episodes, are special episodes that are twice as long as normal episodes, and are similar to normal specials, just shorter, often introducing a new character or two. Some are split into two parts, such as All Tracks Lead to Rome leading to Mines of Mystery and Diesel's Ghostly Christmas. 5 of these mini-specials were made for the CGI era, with the last one being Thomas and the Royal Engine, being released on the 1st of May in 2020, and serving as the finale to the series. Oh, the indignity. Oh, the indignity is Gordon's iconic catchphrase, which was first said in the Season 10 episode, The Green Controller.
Oh, the indignity, huffed Gordon.
Always thought it was in, Season 8 or something. It was also used as an episode title in the 14th season of the show, in which he says it 5 times. Probably the most he's said it in a single episode. Thomas Down the Mine, 1983. This was the 3rd pilot created in the said year, 1983, and is the most successful pilot created for the show, as it allowed the show to be greenlit into the one and only Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends. It was directed by David Mitton, adapted by Britt Allcroft, who actually mortgaged her house to fund the pilot, and produced by both David Mitton and Robert D. Cardona. It was never broadcasted on TV or released on home media, but was test screened on the 3rd of April in the same year. And while Robert D. Cardona is unsure who watched the first test screening, the response they got was positive and allowed the series to be fully funded. As the name implies, this pilot was an adaptation of Down the Mine from the 1953 book Gordon the Big Engine, likely due to there not being as many characters or locations and would be easy to make on a tight budget. Martin Gill was tasked with making Thomas and Gordon and gave them very simple designs based on the Reginald Dalby illustrations. The models were not good runners at all, so much so that they had to be pulled with fishing wire. The smoke generators weren't the best either, using a 12V car cigarette lighter and smoke machine oil dripped onto the hot element prior to a shot being made. This would often result in the bodies of the engines being warped due to the heat, and also resulted in the smoke trickling out of the engine's faces. Footage has yet to be released of the pilot, with only one scene we have in high quality being a shot of Thomas heading to the mines. After the test screenings in April, it was handed to Rick Sigelkow, who he showed to his wife and a preschool class who also responded positively to it, launching Shining Time Station. Rick turned in all his Thomas master tapes to Mattel, and according to Ian McHugh, the producer of the CGI series from 2010 to the end of the series, the pilot is in Mattel's storage unit in Southampton, and while rumors of them planning on remastering it for an 80th anniversary bonus and a DVD were put on the wiki some time ago, that has now been removed and there's no source to this claim, so this likely isn't happening. This is the most sought-out piece of Thomas media because we know it still exists, unlike the 1953 pilot or another pilot we'll touch on soon. I hope we will see it eventually. I'm just as curious as everyone else. So, update? We caught it. The pilot. They released it. That thing on the wiki wasn't a rumor or a jape. We actually caught the pilot. It wasn't on a DVD, but it was uploaded to the YouTube channel. To celebrate 80 years of the Railway series, they actually got the original film reel of the pilot and digitized it, and on the 9th of May 2025, the Down the Mine pilot was officially released, and oh my god, it's the best thing ever. It's so surreal seeing this version of Thomas that we had only ever seen in one clip. Thomas's face remained mostly the same, whereas Gordon looks like that. I don't care though, I still love him. There's so much I love about this pilot. It's so beautiful. I've been obsessed with it for over a week now. That's finally a piece of lost media we can mark off. Thank God. The Mid-Sodor Railway. Opening in 1880, this was one of the oldest steam railways on Sodor, which was run by Duke, Stewart/Pier Sam, and Falcon/Sir Handel, along with a few other engines. The railway's history is one of the richest in the series, going into its development and eventual closure in January of 1947, when the Peel-Goddard line opened and the traffic of the railway plummeted. Stewart and Falcon were bought and taken to the Sodor Aluminum Company, whereas Duke was left in a shed. The Arlesdale Railway now runs through part of the old line. The history of the Mid-Sodor and the engines that run on it are very memorable and is loved by everyone in the fandom, given Wilbur had actual models of the engines who ran on it and some layouts. The inspiration of it comes from the Corus Railway, which had Sir Hayden and Edward Thomas run its line, the same engine Sir Handel and Pier Sam are based on respectively, along with the Festiniog, Welsh Highland, and Snail Beach Railways, the former being what Duke's basis runs on. Annual Stories. Since 1979, there have been hundreds, if not thousands, of annual stories made featuring Thomas and his friends, very few of which were adapted for TV through seasons 2 and 4. Some of these stories would feature original illustrations made for them, with varying quality. As of now, they still make them for All Engines Go. And I'm recording this in June of 2025. I'm re-recording these, and I don't think they're gonna be making them for All Engines Go anymore. Thomas Wood. By far the most controversial Thomas range to ever be released was Thomas Wood. Starting in 2017, Thomas Wood was immediately criticized for its cheap appearance and significant downgrade from the original wooden railway toys that we had before. Bigger engines were downsized and had exposed wood, along with losing other parts from the original range, such as domes and coal loads. They also had a new track adaptation system which was incompatible with the original range and other third-party ranges. Although did contain adapters, but really, come on. Despite trying to remedy the range by giving the engines fully painted bodies, the range was discontinued in 2021, and a revival of Wooden Railway replaced it, which was received much better. US and UK narration differences. Despite the US and UK both speaking English, Thomas has two different narrations and voice casts in the model series and CGI series for both countries. This is due to there being different dialects and terms for certain railway terminology, such as freight cars being called trucks in the UK and conductors being referred to as guards.
Now the freight cars are silly and noisy. They talk a lot and don't attend to what they are doing.
Now trucks are silly and noisy. They talk a lot and don't attend to what they are doing.
I've lost my nice conductor. I've lost my nice conductor, she sobbed.
I've lost my nice guard. I've lost my nice guard, she sobbed.
If it was only the UK dub, some people may be confused as to what a truck, van, or guard is, and to better have American audiences understand the show, they simply use US terms for the US dubs. This also applies to Sir Topham Hatt, but for a different reason, as the title, the Fat Controller, may be seen as offensive to people in the US, and as such he is simply referred to by his real name. Drayton Manor. The Drayton Manor Resort, occasionally associated with the Discover Thomas & Friends exhibit, is a Gauge 1 layout featuring various props and models from the original model series, from way back to the first season to season 12. Some of these are kept in glass cases on display, but the real center of the exhibit is the large layout with models running on it. While it's super cool, the exhibit has become infamous for its poor quality control of the models, some of which were used on screen by the way and use screen-used faces, and a good handful of them have had their paint and models worn down over time, along with some being sloppily put on display. The layout got a major overhaul in 2023, displaying more models used in the show, although this time they're static, and some replicas of engines made by Skarloey Railway Adventure. It seems like mostly everything is better, although I have seen some things here and there, but I'm sure those will get fixed soon. Tugs. Tugs was the sister show to Thomas the Tank Engine that first aired in 1989, co-created by David Mitton, the director of Thomas, and Robert D. Cardona, who was the producer of Tugs and Thomas in its first 2 seasons. Much like Thomas, it also uses live-action models and depicts tugboats and other barges with faces going about their lives in big city port. Unlike Thomas, though, it actually features a full voice cast, something the show wouldn't get until the movie in 2000.
No thanks, just get that stuff away from here. You're welcome to it.
Dynamite's exciting stuff, makes lovely big bangs. Fairly harmless if you know how to handle it, like I do.
Tugs only lasted 1 season though, and was sadly cancelled after the closure of Clearwater Features. Several props from Tugs were later reused for Thomas, including various boats and barges, but most famously Big Mickey, who has the same name in both shows, and someone we will talk about more later. It has developed a cult following for its similarities with Thomas, but also just how different it is to Thomas, being a bit more grounded and mature, and also really awesome. I definitely recommend watching if stuff like Thomas interests you. The Railway Series narrators. The Railway series, much like the TV series, had 6 different narrators. There's the main man himself, Wilbert Awdry, who only narrated Edward's Day Out and Edward and Gordon for a 1957 vinyl of the same name. John Morris, the first main narrator of the Railway series, who narrated the 3 railway engines through Percy the Small Engine, which were released by Delsey Record from 1961 to 1966. Willie Rushton, who became the second after John Morris left, where he narrated Edward the Blue Engine through tramway engines from 1979 to 1984. Ted Robbins, who took over all of the Christopher Awdry books, with the last book he narrated being Wilbert the Forest Engine, and John Gielgud, who narrated some of the Railway series books from the 3 railway engines to 8 famous engines, not including Toby the Tram Engine though. These were used in a documentary for Thomas the Tank Engine Man. There have been a handful of other narrators as well, such as Michael Angelis, Ben Forster, Kevin Jonas, and Bruce Alexander, who narrated all of the books from Wilbert Awdry. Soft reboots. Thomas has had 2 or 3 soft reboots, with the first being the hit era in 2004, following the purchase of Ghislaine, rebranding the show into a completely different format, introducing the Steam Team, learning segments, and overall catered to a much younger audience. The second would be the CGI transition, which simply transitioned the model series into animation, as we talked about in the first layer. The third and last soft reboot was Big World Big Adventures, with the introduction of half the episodes being centered around Thomas in different parts of the world and the other half taking place on Sodor. This also introduced the fantasy sequences that would occasionally appear. Different scaled models. Depending on the setting or episode, another scale may be required to interact with other elements of the set, like the bigger narrow gauge engines that were used after Season 5. Thomas is a good example of someone who has had different scaled models throughout the years, given he's the main character. There's, of course, the original Gauge 1 models, which were used ever since the Down the Mine pilot, his 3.5 gauge model made during production of what would soon become Thomas and the Magic Railroad, and later used to interact with the Jack and the Pack models, and his Gauge 3 model, which was made in Season 9 to work alongside the large-scale narrow-gauge engines, as the new models were much bigger than their original Season 4 and 5 counterparts, and would not be scaled accurately if put next to a Gauge 1 model. A few other engines also have differently scaled models, such as James and Percy. It's usually pretty easy to tell which one is a Gauge 1 and Gauge 3 model if you look at some of these smaller bits and details of them, and particularly the faces, because while they may be one-to-one recreations of the Gauge 1 faces, they have some slight differences here and there. I think James stands out the most. It's pretty obvious to tell it's his Gauge 3 model because it looks like shit. Stories and accidents are based on real events. Numerous different stories from the Railway series are based on real-life events that happened in some railways around the world, which Wilbert would learn via newspapers. There's the story of an engine getting stuck in a flood while trying to pull a passenger train, which would later inspire a story in Percy the Small Engine, and even a story with Wilbert himself where he accidentally left a woman behind while he was volunteering as a guard. He later used this event as inspiration for Peter Sam and the Refreshment Lady. To my knowledge, the TV series doesn't have that many references to real-world events, although the crash in A Bare Review for Gordon is seemingly directly based on the Montparnasse crash of 1895. Big Mickey. Big Mickey was a crane that was originally a character in Thomas's sister show Tugs, as we talked about before, and later came to Thomas and Friends after the show was cancelled. He was featured in countless episodes as a normal crane working at the docks, until he was finally properly introduced in season 21's episode, New Crane on the Dock, where he's not only given a speaking role and face, but still retains his original name from Tugs.
So now you speak? You've been standing there silent all these years, Big Mickey, and you've never said a single word!
Making this the first character from that series to exist in both Tugs and Thomas. Although nothing of Tugs is ever mentioned by Big Mickey and Thomas, not even a reference of some kind, except for his name, and he is generally seen as a completely different character whose existence pays homage to Tugs. Think of him as like an alternate universe counterpart, that's how I see it at least. How amazing is it that they did that? They could have named this guy Ralph or Jeff or just not give him a face at all, much like before, but going out of their way to not only characterize him, but call back to his origin is such an amazing touch fans of both Tugs and Thomas could understand. Edward's absence in Thomas and the Magic Railroad. Out of all the main characters to appear in Thomas and the Magic Railroad, Edward is noticeably missing. According to Phil Furl in an interview, there wasn't really a chance to have him present, as there wasn't enough screen time or opportunity to use him in a valuable way that would add to the story. I mean, you could have used him as a background character, but sure, I guess.
This is your shining time, climbing through stars to your
Name board segments. These were small little intermission segments that were made during the first season to transition from one episode to the next. They were used in UK airings of the show and would later be used for VHSs and DVDs in the US. They appeared in seasons 1 and 2 and in season 3, although Oliver and Bulgy's were exclusive to the Thomas in the UK trip video, which we'll touch on much later. Season 4 was the last to have these segments, but Season 7 also had some of these with the 5 Engines in the Shed music video. Name boards for Toad and Bulstrode were also made but never used. Rare merchandise. This is of merchandise that sellers online, such as on eBay, label as rare when they either aren't and are just set as such to increase their value. Tomy Oliver is a prime example, as he was never released outside of Japan and never got a Trackmaster toy release, making him exclusive to it. As such, various sellers who own a Tomy Oliver will sell him for high prices online. Thomas live shows. Thomas has had numerous live shows throughout the years. The first one I could find happened on December the 26th of 2002 with the Thomas and Friends The Big Live Tour and the All Aboard Live Tour, produced in the UK by DC Entertainment and Telltale Productions. Not those ones, along with touring in Japan by Fuji Television in 2005. Numerous other tours and live shows were made, still continuing to this day with the All Engines Go rebrand. However, by far the most controversial and forgotten live show was the 60th anniversary party, held on the 4th of June in 2005 in the UK. It sounded fun. You had all kinds of entertainers, face painting, a play area, and all sorts of things kids would like. But what made it so disappointing was the actual live show itself, which featured Thomas and the other engines as cardboard cutouts. Attendees weren't even allowed to meet Thomas, and along with the very poor show and management, the event was ultimately a failure. Hitler sent out refunds to upset patrons via a special email and telephone line, and ever since then, to my knowledge, we haven't had a live Thomas event as bad as this, which is good. There's a page made by a disappointed dad, Simon Oxley, going through his experience, along with numerous other parents who had the displeasure of the 60th anniversary party, and from what I've read it sounds like hell. I mean, the 60th anniversary wasn't the best, but especially compared to what we have now, but at this point I'm convinced it may just be the worst celebration of the series. Ouch. NWR 1991 has made a video detailing the event for those interested in knowing more about it, which will be in the description with everything else. Christopher Awdry. Christopher Awdry is the son of Wilbur Awdry, born on the 2nd of July in 1940. At the age of 2, he became bedridden with measles, and Wilbur Awdry would create the Railway series stories as he ran out of other materials to read out, as mentioned before. Christopher also had toys made for him by Wilbur, one of which would become the little blue tank engine we all know and love. He later took over for Wilbur after he retired from the Railway series, and went on to write other annual stories, some of which were later adapted for the TV series. He also wrote other books featuring anthropomorphic engines not affiliated with Thomas. Edward and Henry replacement. Infamously, following the Big World Big Adventures rebrand of Thomas, Edward and Henry were written out of the main cast, to diversify it, which was predominantly boys at the time, and made to be background characters, only having minor roles in episodes. Edward was replaced in favor of Rebecca, and Henry would follow suit, although this was not originally intended, which we will talk about much later in this Iceberg. Despite Ian McHugh saying they would still very much be a part of the show, their lack of a presence is very noticeable, barely appearing in any episodes, and even when they do, they either never speak or they're never acknowledged. Railway series continuation. As mentioned before with Christopher Awdry, Wilbur retired from writing for the Railway series, and his son took over. Starting in 1983, he would continue writing various stories under the original series name, and despite being written by someone other than Wilbur, the new series would continue the number scheme, with his first story, Really Useful Engines, being the 27th book of the series. He had other stories planned too, but they were cancelled, such as the infamous Barry the Rescue Engine, which we will discuss later, along with various other outlines for stories. Christopher ended the series on the 6th of July in 2011 with the book Thomas and His Friends, concluding the series as a whole. Railway series exclusive merch. Various characters from the Railway series have had merchandise throughout the years, such as Coldy, D199, Bear, and the Big City Engine, despite none of them appearing in the show. The Thomas Creator Collective. The Thomas Creator Collective, or TCC, was a series on the official Thomas YouTube account, ran and produced by fans of the show, such as Diesel D199, who was the director, Enterprising Engines, Upside Now, Flying Pringle, and many other fans. The series is not canon to the show and was only made to advertise toys. It started on the 6th of November of 2015, oh my god, this is going to be 10 years old this year, and would continue with new episodes as the years went on, a lot of which are often centered around the latest special and their characters, along with completely original stories. Old characters returned as well, such as Class 40, Scruffy, the Horde Lorries, and fan favorite Boko. It even went on to win an award in 2017, winning the Synopsis Award from Synopsis Kids. However, the series would come to an end on the 19th of March in 2019, as not only did strict regulations from Mattel make the series difficult to work on, but the team behind the series was feeling creatively burnt out. Duck's original name. Duck was originally named Montague in lore, but was nicknamed Duck due to his supposed waddle.
What's your name? Asked the Fat Controller. Montague, sir, but I'm usually called Duck. They say I waddle. I don't really, sir, but I like Duck better than Montague.
Duck got his name from the real-life model of him owned by Wilbur Awdry, which had a defective wheel and caused him to run with a waddle. His children nicknamed him Duck for that, and it's been his name ever since. Model whereabouts. After season 12, Thomas transitioned into CGI, which meant the original props of the show were no longer needed. All of the models were logged and referenced from 2010 until early 2011, and afterwards it was decided which models would go into storage, be given to crew members, or even disposed of. Various props were either put on storage, some of which previously resided with Hit Entertainment and now currently reside with Mattel, with some put up on display at official Thomas parks and events, such as Drayton Manor and its Discover Thomas and Friends exhibit. Others were given to crew members as stated before, with some selling them to bidders on prop auction sites, some of which being fans of the show. There are dedicated accounts made to preserving these models and props, such as Thomas Tank merch. In some other occasions, some of these props are disposed of outright, such as with Duke's original small model, as it was seen as being cheaper and more cost-effective to make a larger model if they were to ever do so. He was marked as no longer exists, but is thankfully owned and preserved by Thomas Tank merch, in the condition he was last in. The same cannot be said for his close-up model, however, which was actually disposed of and no longer exists. I'm writing this in November, and we finally found out what happened to the first season Thomas model. You're probably wondering why Thomas is in such a terrible shape. That's because he was painted and then sanded down to be used to make resin molds for a new model of him, made while Season 4's production was still ongoing. Several casts of this Thomas are still out there, with some being sold on auction sites and others being put on display at various exhibits. The original Season 1-3 model is available to bid on the Prop Store auction site, along with some other items, but as of the making of this script, it only has one bid, with the auction ending on the 14th of November. Although, by the time I get this video out, the bidding would have already ended, and it's June the 9th of 2025, I'm re-recording all these lines, and yeah, that's long over now. Black James. In his first ever appearance, James was originally painted black, which is in reference to the liveries his bassist wore. Following his accident, he was painted in red for the rest of both the Railway series and TV series, although he did regain it in The Adventure Begins and in a promotional video. Engine accents. In certain dubs of the show, certain engines have specific accents. Of course, engines from specific parts of the world would have them, such as Donald and Douglas having Scottish accents, since they're from a Scottish railway, and most of the engines seen in The Great Race. But some are given to certain characters who are probably not intended to have them. Emily, for example, in the US has a standard American accent, whereas in the UK she's given a Scottish accent, which first originated from Michael Angelus's interpretation of her.
Slow down, you are going too fast and bumping your passengers.
While the person that designed her, Patrick Sterling, is in fact Scottish, Emily's roots don't necessarily originate from Scotland, so her accent is a bit inaccurate. There's also Connor and Caitlin, who are both based on American engines but weirdly enough have Irish accents.
Oh, Millie! It was kind of scary. I mean, I heard a big bang and felt something snap. I'm going to be much more careful from now on.
Thomas and the Magic Railroad Director's Cut. Originally one of the most sought-after pieces of Thomas Lost Media, the Director's Cut, written by Britt Allcroft, was the original draft of the movie. The movie is drastically different, featuring the inclusion of a character called P.T. Boomer, who we will talk about later, flashback sequences not present in the final film, and a different voice cast. A lot of these changes were made due to test audiences not liking them, finding Boomer too scary and the voice actors sounding too old. As such, numerous changes and rewrites were made to the movie, giving us the movie we have now. Oh wait, hang on, this just in. The person who made the Thomas fandom documentary in Unlikely Fandom, who goes by Cardi, is actually working with a team to restore the director's cut of Thomas and the Magic Railroad in higher quality, with new voice lines from the old cast and all kinds of other things here and there. This restoration has garnered fan praise and over $10,000 in donations to the project. I don't know if it'll still be around by the time I get this video out, but I'll leave a link to the Magic Railroad website if you're interested in donating to the cause. Dropped returnees / characters intended to appear in CGI. A handful of characters from the original model series and railway series were considered to return to the show. Boko, Duke, Derek, Freddy, and even the Coldy Fell railway engines were intended to appear in the show at some point, but for one reason or another were dropped. Despite not making it into the CGI era, there's still a chance they can return and all engines go. If Bolstra of all characters can get in, I wouldn't be surprised if the others did too, but that's just wishful thinking. And considering the series is over, they're never coming back. Skarloey Railway Livery Change. In the Railway series, all of the steam engines on the Skarloey Railway are depicted in a red livery. When it came time to incorporate them into the show, however, they got very different appearances, the fleet having almost all of the colors of the rainbow. The reason this was done was so it would be easier for viewers to identify the engines if they had different liveries. I can definitely see why they do this, as I still end up occasionally getting Skarloey and Sir Handel mixed up due to how similar they look at the same livery. Sodor maps. Sodor has had numerous different maps as the years went on, starting all the way back in 1949 after the release of Tank Engine Thomas again, where Wilbert's children claimed the race Thomas and Bertie had was unfair, and to remedy this, Audrey drew the Farquhar branch line to illustrate that both of them had the same amount of hurdles and obstacles to win the race, finally making them see the race was fair. Audrey continued to expand on Sodor, helping make sense of the numerous different stories and locations. His last map was created in 1992. The show also has its own interpretation of Sodor, created by David Mitton in 1983, changing various locations and whatnot, and would later influence later maps that the crew would use. P.T. Boomer. P.T. Boomer, the PT standing for passing through, was a character originally intended to appear in Thomas and the Magic Railroad as said before. Played by Doug Lennox, who had starred in numerous movies before this point, such as the original X-Men in 2000, Boomer was the main antagonist, with Diesel 10 being the secondary. He had a long-lasting grudge against Burnett Stone after he and Tasha started a relationship, and would bully him into letting him drive Lady. He crashed her and left Shining Time, while Burnett Stone spent years trying to restore her. He returned 40 years later, hell-bent on destroying Lady and subsequently all the engines on Sodor. Despite being grouped with Diesel 10, he has no real affiliation with him, and the two only work together at the climax of the movie. And of course, during test screenings, test audiences found him too scary, and had him removed from the movie. Voice lines relating to him or said by Boomer were changed to now be referring to Diesel 10. Despite not being a character in the movie, he still does make a cameo in the final movie, with Burnett Stone's introduction, and even in some books. Blue, Donald, and Douglas. In the Railway series, after Donald and Douglas are bought by the Fat Controller and are asked what color they would like to be painted in, they both said blue, a nod to their real-life faces that wore blue liveries, and ever since then, they have always worn blue. This doesn't happen in the show, as according to Robert Gauld Galliards, there were no intentions to make them blue, and it would make it easier for viewers to identify them over the other blue engines of the show. While they are never painted blue in the TV series, they are occasionally painted as such in a few books, most notably the My Thomas Story Library books. Smudger. Smudger was the first engine not created by Wilbur Awdry to be exclusive to the TV series. He replaces an American engine by the name of Stanley in the Duke the Lost Engine story Grand Puff, due to the crew not having enough of a budget to make an entirely different engine. They instead reused Rheneas, painted him green, and gave him new face molds. His role in the story is virtually the same as Stanley's, although instead of being made into a pumping engine, he was converted into a generator. The Marklin Engine. The Marklin engine was a stock standard Gauge 1 model often used in Season 1 to give the illusion of traffic and various background shots of the show, and foreground shots sometimes. While it doesn't appear formally in any episodes, and is by all means not a canon character, never acknowledged by anyone, it does make some cameo appearances in the show and is seen in some behind-the-scenes photos. During production of Season 2, the Marklin engine was cut up and used as scrap dressing, as there was no use for it anymore given there were other engines who could pull trains in the background. Its scrap form later appeared as a cameo in Blue Mountain Mystery at the Diesel Works. Other Markland engines were also used for parts for other engines, such as Percy, Toby, Bill and Ben, Mavis, Diesel, Duck, Daisy, Boko, and City of Truro. 98462 and 87546. These are two previously unnamed big engines who originally worked on Sodor. They were mean and rude engines who loved teasing Edward, and were eventually sent away by the Fat Director back to the mainland. Their fate's unknown, but most likely scrapped. They were not made with any specific basis or real headcanon in mind, created and inserted by William Middleton and Reginald Dolby. A reader by the name of Ross wrote to Wilbur and asked who they were, and if they were in other stories. Wilbur came up with an explanation on the spot and said they were on trial on Sodor, and came up with the numbers. The numbers themselves do not exist in real life, so tracking down a real-life basis is not possible. Real engines in Thomas. Of course the engines in Thomas are based on real-life locomotive classes, but this is about real engines who appeared in the books and show, such as the Flying Scotsman, the City of Truro, Stepney, and Green Arrow, all four of which are directly based on their real-life counterparts of the same name. And how could I talk about real engines in Thomas without mentioning the Talithlin railway engines, with Talithlin herself appearing in Little Old Engine's final story, Little Old Twins, a few times in the Very Old Engine story Crosspatch, again in Duck and Dukes with Dolgok, and finally in Great Little Engines, in which Sir Handel visited the Talithlin railway. Throughout other Thomas and Friends books, other real-life engines appear or are mentioned.
I knew an engine called King James, remarked Duck, in the old days at Paddington. King James I he was, but he didn't swank about like that.
Upcoming Mark Forrester movie. As I am writing this, which is August the 21st of 2024... There is a Thomas movie in the works from Mattel Films, directed by, well, Mark Forrester, best known for directing World War Z and Christopher Robin, and produced by Robbie Brenner. What the movie is about is currently unknown as of right now, as it seems to have started production in 2020 and nothing of it has been heard since. We do know it'll be your standard family-friendly movie with a blend of CGI and live action. For a while, this movie was often mistaken for the cancelled The Adventures of Thomas movie, which was being directed by Shane Acker, likely because the movie also would have used the same CGI live action thing this movie will have, but no, these are completely different movies. Different directors and producers, a completely different cast and crew, and based off of what we know of The Adventures of Thomas now, we know now this isn't something we'll likely see in this one. Many fans are assuming the movie was quietly cancelled given nothing of it has been mentioned and the long silence there has been surrounding the movie. I mean, like, it's 2025, man. We haven't heard anything of this movie in, like, half a decade. However, it's important to keep in mind certain movies can take years or even decades to be made. I can't see why Mattel would cancel the movie now with how successful the Barbie movie was and the green light they've given for a few other movies that are going to be coming out soon. Just all I'm saying is that we gotta wait a bit more until it's either properly announced or properly cancelled. I'm sure once we start getting leaked behind the scenes photos like with literally every other movie we've gotten as of late, that's when we'll know the movie's relatively close to post-production. Railway Series Illustrators. The Railway Series has had 6 different illustrators during its run, not counting the illustrators who wrote for spin-offs and annuals. There's William Middleton, the original illustrator of the Railway Series who only illustrated for the 3 railway engines in 1945, and would later be replaced for reasons we'll get to soon. Reginald Payne, who was the second for the series and the original illustrator of the second Railway Series book, Thomas the Tank Engine in 1946, although went uncredited, but couldn't return due to a nervous breakdown. There's Reginald Dolby, the third illustrator of the series, who re-illustrated the first book, revised the second, and was the main artist for the series, working from the book James the Red Engine to Percy the Small Engine, until 1956 following a feud between him and Wilbur Awdry. You got John T. Kenny, the fourth illustrator of the series, replacing Dolby after his departure, who worked through the 8 famous engines to Gallant Old Engine, who left in 1972 due to his eyesight failing him. You got Gunvor and Peter Edwards, the 5th illustrators of the series after Kenny departed, working through Stepney the Bluebell engine to the final book in Wilbert's run of the series with Tramway engines. And finally, you've got my guilty pleasure illustrator, Clive Spong, the 6th and final illustrator of the series, illustrating all of Christopher Awdry's books from the first to the very last one. I say guilty pleasure because not a lot of fans are particularly a fan of Clive Spong's illustrations, especially the first one. Like, I'm sorry, that's just not good. But I like it. Like, yeah, it's not as good as the Edwards, like, not in a million years, but something about the style and the way the engine's faces look are really, really nice looking. Railway series and TV series location differences. While both continuities share the same name for various locations, a lot of them are vastly different from each other. The best and prime example of this is Knapford Station. While it's a small station with 2 platforms serving as a junction for the Farquhar branch line, it's a massive canopy station with 5 platforms that all the engines are seen at. There is also Tidmouth, which is the largest town on Sodor in the Railway series, being as big as Knapford in the TV series, but is significantly downsized in the TV series, being a small canopy station with only 2 platforms. There are other examples, but these 2 are the most notable, I would say. Boko and Daisy use the same masks. If you're a fan of the show, you've probably noticed how similar Boko and Daisy's face masks look. This is because some of Boko's faces were duplicated and modified with makeup to resemble Daisy. Not all of Boko's faces were reused, however, and both of them have face masks that are exclusive to each other, such as Daisy's frowning face and Boko's surprised one. Original Thomas toy. Before the Railway series was conceived, Wilbert made Christopher a wooden toy for Christmas, who would later become Thomas, with a number 1 on its bunker and the initials NW on the side tanks, which originally meant nowhere instead of Northwestern, as this was before the railway was canonically established. This toy was later used as reference for Wilbert when drawing sketches of Thomas, and given to Reginald Payne to draw for Thomas the tank engine. The toy was lost after a visit in the US, but replicas were made by Michael White for promotional events. The Island of Sodor, its people, history, and railways. This is a huge lore book created by Wilbert Awdry and George Awdry in 1987, going into the history of the island, its railways, people, engines, and others, intended for an older audience that would not be confined to the traditional Railway series books for children that would be hard for them to grasp and understand, or at least not be interested in them at a young age. There are numerous different elements that were never mentioned or touched on in these stories, such as the creation and fate of the Sodor and Mainland Railway, the existence of the coffee pot engines, Sir Topham Hatt swearing after being scammed into buying Henry, and even history dating back to the Middle Ages in the 9th and 10th centuries. Some of these are even mentioned and referenced in the show on occasion. The abundance of lore in this book cannot be underestimated, as I assure you that if you were to read this lore book yourself, if you hadn't already, you'd have a better appreciation for not just the Railway series, but all of the effort and history and lore that Wilbert and George had put into the series. Cancelled toys. Of course, with any toy range, there are a handful of toys that were cancelled for one reason or another. Mike, for example, was intended to be released for Ertl, even having a prototype made, but never came out. Likely because Ertl was replaced with Take-Along at this time. There's Gordon's Snow Machine for Wooden Railway, Red Pelham for Bachmann, and even a Bandai Tex Old Shape Henry, albeit it might just be a prototype. We're going to come out at some point. I think the most recent cancelled toy was the Bachmann Duncan, because Bachmann couldn't convert it into a Douglas model from the Tally Flynn, as they had done so with Skarloey and Sir Handel for their counterparts. CGI model so bad it cancelled a whole toy, you have to be kidding me, man. Eras. Thomas has had 5 different eras in its lifetime. There's the classic era from season 1 to 7 before the hit buyout. This is probably the era you've seen as a kid, like me and a majority of other people in the fandom. This era is remembered for Thomas's beginnings and how amazing the show was at this time. Lots of memorable episodes and characters. I genuinely miss it. You got the Hit era from seasons 8 to 16, also known as the Sharon Miller era. While it's the longest and was one of the most popular eras at the time, it's often regarded as one of the worst, with formulaic writing and morals and complete character assassinations, completely disregarding the previous canon and the Railway series. If you couldn't gather it by now, it got its nickname the Sharon Miller era from the head writer of the show at this time, which had the same cookie-cutter writing the fans grew to hate. Now I really ought to preface that people shouldn't harass Sharon Miller over the episodes and specials she wrote for Thomas during this time. In the end, it's a kid's show, man. It's been molded into a kid's show by people who don't really understand what its significance was. And while it's a significant downgrade from what we had before, people who aren't too familiar with its roots or anything like that will treat it as a baby show. And that's just how it was for a while, and still kind of is, unfortunately. This era ended following the Mattel buyout. There's the Nitrogen era from seasons 11 to 16, a sub-era nicknamed as such as all the episodes and specials were animated by Nitrogen Studios. This era is lumped in with the Hit era as a lot of the episodes follow the same formulaic writing the Hit model series had, so I've classified it as a sub-era. The Brenner era from seasons 17 to 21, also known affectionately as the Brenaissance by fans. It got its name and nickname from the head writer of this era, Andrew Brenner, a writing veteran for the show, and is practically universally praised by all fans of it for its much better writing, ditching what the era had before and introducing more fun episodes, along with numerous callbacks to classic series episodes and the Railway series. This era ended after the Big World Big Adventures rebrand, which ran from season 22 to season 24. This is the shortest, last, and second most hated era of the show. Andrew Brenner only wrote for the 22nd season before his departure. This introduced the off-Sodor episodes and fantasy sequences that left fans perturbed from the sudden change of style, and also this really garish and eye-bleeding saturation that everything has. This era proved to be a big failure as it resulted in the show's end. An era so bad it literally killed this show that's been going on since 1984. Way to go. Bouncing. Bouncing, also known as gesturing, is a term used to describe an engine moving their body. While engines began to bounce with the release of Journey Beyond Sodor, they had very subtle bounces and gestures before then, which I think is most notable in the Nitrogen era. This was presumably incorporated into the series to make the engines more expressive and gesture to others, the same way the characters in Bob the Builder do. The response to them bouncing is generally mixed among fans, but I myself really like it when it's not causing terrible clipping. As a kid, I'd do the same thing with my toys. Learning segments. These were short educational intermissions introduced during the Hits run of the model series from seasons 8 to 12, with some being animated.
What screen? James?
They were in various airings on Nick Jr., PBS Kids, and DVDs. They made over 100 of these, but they stopped making them following the transition to CGI. Welsh coal discrepancy. Henry is known for previously needing special coal to run properly, due to him being in his old shape which had a small firebox and gave him trouble. This was fixed following his Flying Kipper accident where he was rebuilt with a larger firebox and no longer needed special coal. The show remained consistent with this until Thomas and the Magic Railroad, where it's reintroduced and became a mainstay for Henry afterwards.
Morning, Henry. What's the matter?
I've got boiler ache.
And I'm collecting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 trucks of special Island of Sodor coal for you.
Despite not needing it anymore, and would be brought up all the way until King of the Railway, which was the start of the Brenner era, fixing this discrepancy for good after Toby mentions the special coal issue was fixed years ago.
Don't tell me he needs special coal again.
No, Gordon. That was fixed years ago.
Railway Adventures PC game. This is a PC game developed by Mind's Eye Productions, god no not that one, and published by Smoby Players and Infogrames. It's very unique from the other PC games as it features a mountable controller that you could put over your keyboard that would act as if you were driving an engine. I actually own this in real life, but as I'm making this I lost the controller, but I still have the manual, disc, and the entire box. Okay, so update on this. While I was looking through some old stuff, I not only found a lot of my old Thomas toys, but I actually found the controller, and it actually still works on my keyboard. It's the thing I showed earlier in the first layer about merchandise. Changed episode names. In American releases of the first and second season of Thomas the Tank Engine, the episodes had their names changed, possibly for Shining Time Station. There are a lot of examples, such as Thomas and Gordon being renamed to Thomas Gets Tricked, the sad story of Henry being Come Out Henry, Thomas, Percy, and the Cole being Double Trouble, and Percy and Harold being Percy Proves a Point. After Shining Time ended, all the episodes would share the same name for both the US and UK, for the most part. Railway Series Thomas Redesign. Thomas has a distinct dip in the front of his running board, something that is taken from his bassist the E2, but unlike them, Thomas doesn't have a dip where his bunker is. Apparently, this was a source of contention for Wilbert, as the different levels of the front and rear buffer beams would be impractical. This led to the story Thomas Comes to Breakfast, where Thomas runs out of his shed by himself and crashes into a station master's house, badly disfiguring his running board, and is sent away to be repaired. After coming back, he now has a flat running board and keeps it for the rest of the Railway series, not including annual stories or illustration errors. This doesn't happen in the TV series, likely due to budget constraints or to make it so that Thomas's appearance is consistent throughout the series. City of Truro. This is more of the model prop from the show than the engine itself. City of Truro is probably the most detailed and accurate model in the show, but despite its good looks, it doesn't actually run due to budget constraints. It's also interesting to note the City of Turo's smoke box is from a Gauge 1 BR80 Markland model. Unfortunately, in the 5th season, City of Truro was turned into a scrap engine and used as set dressing, and to this day is still in its scrap condition. Bertram. Bertram's a one-off narrow-gauge character that only appeared in the 5th season episode, Toby's Discovery, reusing Duke's model and Smudger's face. After the 6th season, Bertram was reverted back to Duke with a lighter shade of brown and no painted buffer beam. Goofs. Goofs is a term used in various shows and media to point out mistakes in them, and Thomas has a lot of goofs. You can find all kinds of videos going over the ones in the show, but I'll go over a few here. In Thomas and the Trucks, a hand can be seen briefly in the top right corner of the screen where Thomas passes through L's Bridge.
Did you see it? Did you see it?
The reason there's even a hand there was so that the bridge overhang didn't hit the camera, and had to be removed quickly to give the illusion the camera was going under the bridge. Another hand can barely be seen in Dirty Objects pushing James into the tar tankers and in the Flying Kipper.
Did you see?
Various studio equipment can be seen in some shots as well, such as in Thomas and Gordon and Thomas, Percy, and the Cole, although these are only visible in restored reels and not in the original conditions. By far the most infamous goof comes from a restored version of Cole/Henry Special Cole, where Henry reverses into a siding at Wellsworth, hits the station building, and shoots out the siding, with the audio not linking up with anything on screen. This was likely a test shoot testing the speed of Henry's reversing and was mistakenly used in the restored version, as this blooper doesn't appear in the original episode. Ruler photos. Production measurement references, also simply referred to as ruler photos, are pictures taken of engines, rolling stock figures, props, and other things that can be used for various purposes, such as promotional material and merchandise. These are never publicly shared in any books you can buy off the shelf or whatnot, but some crew members share them online. These are very useful for model makers who are trying to make replicas of things from the show, and are generally just pretty neat, a nice insight into the production of the show. Some can be pretty weird though. World War II is canon. If you're familiar with the lore of the Railway series, this isn't that surprising, but for those who don't know, yeah, World War II is canon in the Railway series, and the first one for that matter. Given the lore of the Railway series shares the same history as ours, there's no doubt World War II would play a part in the history of Sodor. Because it has, along with the First World War. Thomas was sent to Sodor during the First War in a mix-up, which we will definitely talk about more later, and two Dukes of Sodor, Charles Henry Normanby and Robert Charles Normanby, fought in both World Wars I and II respectively, the latter being killed in action. And also because, the whole railway was formed because of World War I. It was used as a strategic railway. There's a few more events that transpire on Sodor as a result of the World Wars, which we will get to when we do. Proteus. Proteus is a mysterious engine known for his magical lamp that can grant wishes. While he sounds like a fairy tale, and probably might be, he does have a statue of him, although missing his signature lamp. Engine number meanings. While they may seem like simple numbers to help kids identify the engines and help kids learn how to count, the engine's numbers actually have meanings, or at least most of them do. Despite what some might think, the numbers don't signify which engine was brought onto the island of Sodor, but instead which ones were acquired by the Northwestern Railway, which is why Thomas is number 1 because he was the first engine to be bought for the railway in 1920, instead of Edward, who was bought second in 1921. The same applies to engines 3 through 7, and while Duck and Oliver are numbered 5741 and 1436 respectively, they are both numbered 8 and 11, as they were the 8th and 11th engines to be bought on the Northwestern Railway. In the TV series, the numbers take on a variety of different meanings, such as Rosie being the 37th for being the 37th standard gauge engine introduced in the show, Duchess being 2020 for the year she was introduced in, and Hero's number being in reference to his basis, a JNR D51 class. In the CGI timeline, Thomas gets his number 1 for a different reason. He inherited it from Glynn, the original number 1 on the Farquhar branch line. As for the other main characters, I think it could be assumed they were numbered as such for when they were brought on, like with the Railway series. The Unlucky Tug has made an amazing in-depth video going into the details of the engine's numbers, so go check that out after this. TV series exclusive characters. There are a myriad of characters introduced in the TV series that are not present or mentioned in the Railway series lore, and are completely original creations, with almost all of them only serving to produce toys. The first of these was Smudger, as mentioned before, and ever since Season 4 of Thomas would continue to introduce new characters into the show until the end in 2021. Railway series exclusive characters. And, just like the TV series, there are some Railway series characters who are exclusive to the books and never appeared in the show for one reason or another. However, I feel a big difference between the Railway series and TV series exclusive characters is that these Railway series characters were introduced to world build and expand the lore of the series, but some of these characters would still receive merchandise, but of course not as much as the TV series characters. Faceless engines. For some odd reason, a handful of engines in both the Railway series and a few in the TV series lack a face, but despite not having them, they are still able to communicate with other engines. According to Wilbur Audrey and the Thomas Tank Engine Man, there's a rule he follows where the engines are allowed to have them when they're on Sodor, but not on the mainland. This mostly holds up true with some illustrations, such as Stepney, where the first time we see him, he doesn't have a face, along with other illustrations throughout the books where real-life engines don't have them. However, this is also very inconsistent as some engines on the mainland do have faces, like Stepney again before he's on Sodor and literally the next illustration after his first appearance, some diesels, the scrap engines, and almost every engine in the Great Railway Show. I think it's really up to anyone's interpretation at this point, but I think the inconsistencies can be chalked up to illustration errors and aren't considered canon. Except for Thomas and the Great Railway Show, I don't know what's going on there. The Hara Model Railway Museum. This is a large model railway museum in Nishiku, Yokohama, Japan, that owns a few props from the original television series, such as Thomas's brass model from Thomas and the Magic Railroad, Donald and Douglas, Oliver, Bill and Ben, and the brass models for engines 2 through 7. They also originally owned Duck, but he was returned to Mattel and left undisplayed due to the model suffering damage. They also run these models on a layout, and while they have a better reputation than what Drayton Manor had, their means of displaying their models is still seen as dubious to some fans, and myself included, especially after a video got released of Donald being hit head-on by another engine, although no significant damage was reported. I think, in general, running these one-of-a-kind screen-used props on any layout is kind of iffy. Some of these models are old, man. They probably shouldn't be running on their own like this, especially if they're still prone to accidents on the layout. Thomas video games. Ever since 1990, there have been dozens of different Thomas games released, with the first being titled after the show by Alternative Software in 1990 for the Commodore 64.
Actually, the actual first Thomas the Tank Engine game of any sort was the Grandstand handheld console from 1984. I literally can't find anything about this thing aside from its page on the Thomas Wiki, but it seems to play similarly to how the Nintendo Game & Watches play. I guess technically this would count as a video game, even if it's super limited and very bare bones based on its looks. I know I easily could have just recorded this myself with my own actual voice, but I wanted to be funny.
A lot of these games have pretty similar formats, often revolving around working on soda by pulling trains of various kinds. To no one's surprise, a majority are also aimed towards a much younger demographic, featuring very basic games for toddlers to play and understand while also helping them learn. They're basically no different from your typical edutainment game. Adult parodies. It's no surprise a series as big as Thomas would receive adult parodies of it. To my knowledge, the first ever adult parody originates from the Fast Forward Skits, an Australian comedy show airing from 1989 to 1992 that ran for 4 seasons broadcasted by Channel 7. One of the sketches for the show involved a few skits centered around Thomas and his friends, using big pullback Erdl toys for the characters. There's probably some you've also seen as a kid if you were into Thomas like I am, such as Thomas the Chav Engine,
I as well f***ed.
7 Ways Security Impacts Teddy the Tank Engine, Thomas the Tanked Up Engine by Bobby Darvo, Ernest the Engine, and others.
I'm going to kill again. I'm going to kill again.
Did you see?
And of course, the Robot Chicken parody. Really, I'm just listing off some of the parodies I used to watch as a kid all those years ago. Even to this day, they are still making parodies of Thomas. The most recent and my favorite example is the Sad Tale of Henry the Engine from the Last Week with John Oliver show, which featured a scratch-built O-gauge model that really feels as if it was made by someone who worked on the show. He has like an actual proper working eye mechanism and everything. You can even find the original body shell they used for Henry, and some fans out there have found the chassis they used. If you choose to look these videos up yourself, just keep in mind these are adult parodies. They're going to be very crass and vulgar, and will have very, very raunchy and graphic stuff. So watch at your own discretion. Also, just realized this is the 69th entry. Nice. Hi there. So, I know I said I wasn't going to be releasing one layer at a time individually, and, well, here we are. I've decided I'm going to be releasing the second part and work on the rest of the layers in one huge video. My motivation is really just all over the place. Sometimes I have nights where I'm really locked in and focused on this, whereas others I'd spend nights and weeks making no progress whatsoever. Also, not gonna lie, I also just have a really bad habit of procrastinating. This is something I've been dealing with for years now, and it's gotta be one of my worst habits. But I'm committed to getting this thing completed this year. I mean, you saw how long this damn video was, over an hour and a few minutes, and this isn't even the longest entry on this iceberg. Sometimes this can be really daunting to work on. I just contemplate working on it in my mind, and then I just push it aside because I don't want to deal with it, or I'm just procrastinating. But I promise I will post the last part later this year, the rest of this damn iceberg. Then this burden will be lifted off my shoulders and I'll finally feel a lot better about myself. This thing eats away at me when I'm working on it, and maybe I'm being too hard on myself about all this, but this has been a huge passion of mine for years now, and I hate having it rot in my files for weeks and sometimes even like a month or two. And I want this to not only be as good as I want it to be, but also somewhat up to date and relevant. I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff that got revealed last year thanks to Christopher and Richard Audrey that I gotta add to my iceberg, remove some unimportant entries, update other things such as, stuff regarding Neil, Barry, the Austerity Engine, Dustin, and also stuff regarding the new show coming out later this year too. I'm also looking into having some friends and others contribute to the series. I already have every entry recorded, but as I mentioned before, a handful of them are outdated, so this could be a fun way to get others involved, I don't know. I'll likely be doing that after everything is edited and whatnot, so it'll be quite a while until that happens. Anyway, I've rambled on for long enough. This video was already long enough as is, and I'm just adding more time to it by rambling. If you've made it this far, thank you. I'm glad you're enjoying this endeavor, and I'm glad you got to hear all this. I don't know when I'll be back. That's about it for me. Hope to see you again soon.